Also, that silence at the Madlanga Commission is for Matlala's legal defense team to just confer around this very sticking point around Section 204 affidavit as well as the 105 documents that Matlala has been basing essentially his privilege to invoke his rights of privilege against self-incrimination on Sections 204 as well as the 104 documents relating to his criminal court case, which is the Medicare 24 case. Now, Advocate Silo has argued, however, that Matlala's privilege only extends to his criminal trial and not to the commission. I think they are saying something. Let's take you back there now.
That's a Jen, rather than us just sitting and watching. You'll indicate when you are ready.
You, yes.
All right, that adjournment then, it would appear that this very sticking point that Matlala has been essentially basing his privilege on to invoke his rights of privilege. He was relying on the Section 204 affidavit and 105 documents in particular relating to his criminal court case, which is the Medicare 24 case. And I was saying before we were taken back into the commission that Advocate Silo was arguing, however, that Matlala's privilege only extends to his criminal trial and not to the commission. In other words, a statement he gave cannot be used against him in his trial because the commission is not a criminal court. You will, of course, recall that Matlala was not granted that Section 204 status, usually granted to state witnesses, by the way, relating to that Medicare 24 case. He had agreed to do a Section 105 plea and sentence deal, which he withdrew. That then basically made all of those agreements null and void. And so that is the statement then that Advocate Silo is wanting to see for the purposes of this commission, which is why then they are having that discussion around the documents actually being privileged and that they cannot be shared. And that's the point that Matlala's legal counsel, Advocate Fatima Misi, is essentially conferring with her partner, who is also part of the legal team. Now, just to give you a sense of some of the other discussions that we heard earlier on following that short adjournment after 4 o'clock, the commission itself touched on other issues, including, of course, the matter of General Sibiya, and that is where the crux of this matter began. Thembekile Mrototo is monitoring developments for us inside the Madlanga Commission. Thembekile, of course, the points of contention now relate to that Section 204 affidavit as well as the 105 affidavit, documents that are now null and void, documents that were before the courts. Advocate Silo, as well as the commissioners, being at pains to press that those documents cannot necessarily be relied on because the Madlanga Commission, as we know it, is not a criminal court.
That's right, Unati, and we're going to see how that cookie is eventually going to crumble after the current adjournment, because the legal team for Matlala has now been given a couple of minutes to basically confer, discuss how they're going to deal with those issues going forward. But I want to bring in SABC News senior reporter Canny Maphanga, because we do have some breaking news related to the commission that we want to bring you. It's about testimony here at the commission last Friday that implicated the minister who's on leave for police, Senzo Mchunu. He's responded now, and Canny is here to take us through the ministers. In fact, before we get to what the ministers got to say, Canny, let's put context into what Deena Govender told the commission, a KZN COP last week, and how that compares then to what the minister has said this afternoon.
Well, sure. Lt-Colonel Deena Govender is attached to the KZN Hawks, and he was set to respond to the issue of the Bevan Loftus death or the Bevan Loftus murder, whichever way the allegations point to, because the allegation made by Gregory Loftus as well as KZN IPID, and I think it was to some extent dealt with by the retired subs captain Ashley Houston in terms of the overkill that took place in the amount of rounds rounds that were fired in that particular incident, but it deals with Bevan Loftus and 4 others who were allegedly killed at the hands of police, and the allegation there is that it was intentional. It was part of allegations of extrajudicial killings in KwaZulu-Natal. Now, Lt-Colonel Deena Govender, it is alleged that it was his members that are part of this alleged conduct in the KwaZulu-Natal province. In this particular instance, it was alleged that an alleged rival gang leader, let's put it that way, Clive Naika, had allegedly commissioned Lt-Colonel Deena Govender, to actually commission this act through his members. And there was an unexplained transaction of 2.3 million that he says he's going to come back and explain to the commission, but that was also something that they pointed to as the possible explanation behind the events that took place with respect to Bevan Loftus. Now, where Lieutenant Colonel Deena Govender flips the script is that he came to the commission and stated that in that very same week of the 21st of August, an alleged political fixer by the name of Mavuso, who he identifies as Mavuso, allegedly called him and asked him to basically throw Lt-Gen Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi under the bus, and that he can't go down alone with respect to this incident. And he alleged that a meeting then took place where Mchunu was allegedly called by this fixer, and that is where he alleges that Mchunu asked him to go to the commission and attribute that instruction to Lt-Gen Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi. So the implication there is that there was an alleged plot to basically throw Mkhwanazi under the bus over allegations of extrajudicial killings in the KZN province.
And let's contextualize what appears to be a deepening rift, if you will, even now between Mchunu and Mkhwanazi. We've heard about the issues to do with the political killings, task team. There are other elements as well. But what is at the heart of it? And just in dealing with that, the alleged extrajudicial killings, which fall outside the mandate, in fact, of the Commission in the last week or so, how does that tie into what's alleged to have gone on here?
Well, the reason why the KZN IPID Deputy Director for Investigations, Len John, said that he was bringing it before the Commission was because he said that there was a risk of an infiltration of alleged cartel or alleged gang members using task team members in the KZN province to basically further their interests, so to allegedly wipe out their opponents. In this context, it was the tow truck and gang leaders within the KZN province, and it is alleged that that was the battle that was taking place. And Lieutenant Colonel Deena Govender, interestingly, comes in and doesn't deal with that particular issue, but places Senzo Mchunu at the center of some form of an alleged plot to target Lt-Gen Mkhwanazi in this particular incident, or in his evidence, as he states, to use him as a pawn to allegedly discredit Lt-Gen Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi, who has for some time faced criticisms over the number of shootings in the KZN province. We know the defense is that they take place out of self-defense, but what was being alleged through IPID and KZN is that this was allegedly deliberate, that this is part of the MO in the KZN province. The inference there was that it was allegedly institutionalized, and that is the context upon which you get these allegations before the probe. So, of course, something like this would be serious for the Police Minister Senzo Mchunu to answer to, because it basically frames him as someone that is allegedly interfering in the work of the Madlanga Commission. Because the meeting, if it indeed took place, would have been a day before he was set to appear before the Madlanga Commission, at the height of the probe intensifying its efforts into allegations of extrajudicial killings, among others, and making advancements in other areas before the probe. So he has since, through a spokesperson, issued out a statement stating that he's noted these allegations, and he states that, quote unquote, it's made without any evidence, and he rejects it with the contempt it deserves. He says that the dropping of his name by this witness is designed to portray him as someone who is interfering with the work of the Commission. He adds that he respects the work of the Commission and believes it must not be deterred by what he describes as opportunistic allegations. And he states that a more elaborate statement, including the allegations that have been made in the recent past, which also include the IGI report, I'm assuming, will be issued in due course. So this is just the latest from the Police Minister Senzo Mchunu, who has learned of the allegations made by Lieutenant Colonel Deena Govender. He came armed with audio of this alleged political fixer. He also intimated that he had CCTV of the said meeting that took place somewhere at a hotel in Durban. And of course, we're not sure whether or not he has anything to link Police Minister Senzo Mchunu to the actual alleged instruction that he says was made at the time of the meeting.
I keep looking at the door where Cat Matlala, we're expecting, will come back into the room once his legal team has been able to settle on a position to go forward. But Canny, I think it's worth us putting into context the legal debate that has now resulted in the Commission having to take this break. It's to do with what can and cannot be disclosed related to Matlala and that plea deal that he later abandoned to do with the Medicare 24 contract.
So with Matlala, it's a bit of a difficult time for him on the witness stand because it seems that he may want to have his cake and eat it too, because he wants to invoke this right against self-incrimination, but in the same breath, he does not want to share that particular statement or any details in that regard to substantiate why he's invoking these rights. And this is a consistent pattern in Cat Matlala's evidence, where he simply just does not want to entertain or refuses to entertain these questions, but he's been taken to task over it because he can't point to the actual offence that such an entertainment can actually produce if he were to go into these questions. I think the reason why he's possibly so hesitant about all of these different themes, because he's in a number of themes, is because these themes are interconnected and it involves a network of individuals or persons of interest before the Madlanga Commission. If you deal with one, you'll get to one name and another name and another name and another name. And I think that is what is being avoided here through these particular, I guess, suggestions or adjournments. And it's pretty much been an entire day of the Commission taking breaks to accommodate the requests being made by Cat Matlala's legal team. But at the very least, when the Commission is able to even source a little bit of vague information from Cat Matlala, it seems that this right comes up again. And I think it's more so about the network it's set to reveal, the alleged network it's set to reveal, and has little to do with the kind of consequences that could follow. Because if an investigation is going to take place, then an investigation is going to take place. If you're going to be charged, you're going to be charged. But in terms of these themes and these alleged networks, this is seemingly about, or rather appearing to be about, the kind of names that could pop up and the kind of networks it could reveal and the kind of context it can give to all of these allegations leading up to that PKTT disbandment directive.
I mean, it's a very hot auditorium here at the Commission, but I suspect it's even hotter if you are in the witness box, as Cat Matlala has been, even though his lawyers have tried at least to get him out early today several times. And speaking of his legal team, it is worth noting, right, that just before lunchtime, these are the lawyers who were basically giving the Commission an ultimatum, basically saying, listen, if you don't grant us the sort of postponement that we're asking for, we will possibly leave or abandon our mandate, or whatever the legal language is, but then only to say it was a hypothetical scenario and that they're now going to be staying on.
I honestly think it may have been an attempt at the time to try and seemingly, allegedly strong-arm the Commission into granting a postponement in that particular period, but it may have been a miscalculation on their part because the Commission was ready to proceed, leaving them in a position where they had to now go on with the testimony. But it's still proving to be a bit of a challenge because the right is still being invoked, and it's being invoked in a manner where there's no substantiation, and it appears that you have a witness who's trying to have his cake and eat it too. So it becomes a difficult exercise for the evidence leaders as well as the Commission's bench. You see Advocate Silo trying to get to the meat of the issues, but I think it's what those connections are going to show that may be something that Cat Matlala is trying to shield himself away from, not so much about the cases that are currently ongoing. But I think the Commission is onto it and is getting to the smaller and finer details with respect to his evidence, because it's through these different themes that the network will start to make sense, and you'll be able to establish what this alleged infiltration is, if indeed it is found that it exists in the criminal justice system.
I'm not sure if we're making progress, because I've just seen, actually, we're looking at the back door there, that in fact the chairperson of the Commission has now decided to grab a chair as we wait for this to resume. But Canny and I will speak to you. We'll talk through what's happened today until the resumption of proceedings. And Canny, you talk about Cat Matlala being reluctant, if you will, to respond to questions or give up certain details. He fought actually quite strongly against speaking about Shadrack Sibiya, the suspended Deputy Police Commissioner, this afternoon, and it's left many in the room wondering what it was about that relationship that he feels would prevent him from disclosing any detail, even describing what kind of relationship it was.
Well, it's about the alleged features or unlawful features of the relationship, because we already know through the context of the alleged middleman. I find it very interesting that he called Sergeant Kosi as the one who set up the alleged arrangement between Sibiya and him, and that makes no sense in that regard, because at every point that you meet Sergeant Kosi in the context of the evidence before the probe, he's always playing that alleged middleman role or an alleged runner role. Why would it be different for alleged cartel member Vusimuzi, Matlala, and Lt-Gen Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi Sibiya? Because of the fact that Sibiya is a high-ranking general, it becomes quite obvious why he couldn't have direct communications with alleged cartel member Vusimuzi, Matlala. That would be a direct conflict of interest. And you see it in the communications that Sergeant Kosi at all points is interacting solely for a different individual. So that is why I think he is getting away from that particular arrangement or dealings, because he understands the implications that come with such evidence being placed before the probe. Sibiya is not before any Criminal Process Act this particular matter, and discussing this issue does not in any way affect his Medicare 24 fraud case or the attempted murder case. So outside of that, you can only draw the inference that it's whatever that dynamic is going to reveal that he is seeking to get away from, not so much the fear of incrimination in his current criminal matters.
And Canny, just as you were speaking, Matlala came back. He's taken a seat in the witness box. Kwazi will show you. Kwazi is the man who's working the camera for the SABC news team. This suggests that we're about to resume. Canny and I will continue to chat because the name of Jotham Swazi came up again. He was discussed a great deal last week. It's another relationship that Matlala says was not a friendship. They wanted to do business. In fact, they wanted to buy a private plane together, but that never happened.
Well, when you speak of that name, it is believed that that is allegedly one of the bigger fish in terms of allegations of this regard, and he seems to not want to entertain that subject. There's a number of certain names, a long list of names, let's put it that way, that he actually didn't address in great detail or at all. He was silent on in his initial statement and gives pretty much nothing in the supplementary statement where he was supposed to explain those relationships. And I think it has more to deal with, as we repeated earlier, more of what the networks tell you, not so much of what the fear of incrimination is about, because if you are able to delve into that relationship, it connects to a different relationship, which connects to a different relationship, because we see that Mswazi's chats show that all of the persons of interest before the Madlanga Commission have to some extent featured in his chats. So it certainly is something to be said about the alleged network that may exist in this particular dynamic, because it's quite interesting how he was very candid about Brown Mkhotsi, but chose not to delve into issues relating to Mswazi, Lt-Gen Nhlanhla Sibiya, Major General Richard Sibiya, Mike van Wyk, where you can find him featuring quite prominently, or at least showing some kind of extensive relationship with these individuals. He chose not to go into that information. And I think it has more to do with what the networks or the alleged networks reveal, and very little to do with this fear against self-incrimination. Discussing Sibiya will have no effect on the Medicare 24 fraud case. It may have issues for him in the future that he may have to answer to, but in terms of his particular case, he's struggling to find the offense that that particular information will delve deep into if he is set to testify about it here before the Pope.
So there is Vusimuzi Matlala then back in the witness box. You'll be able to see him, hand on his chin, pondering perhaps what's going to come next in his testimony. But a reminder that this is a man who will also at the end of today's session have to go back to a cell because he is in Correctional Services custody. And that custody and the terms, the conditions that govern what awaiting trial inmates have to abide with were blamed by his legal team for what they said earlier was an inability to be able to consult as much as they'd wanted to meet a previous commission deadline. And that issue, Canny, am I right, still has a bit of a question mark around it.
Yes, because it's not clear whether or not they're abandoning this substantive application. It feels like they're moving this application through each theme, if we're being quite honest, because each theme they discuss this issue or the right against self-incrimination. So in some way, it's featuring through his testimony theme by theme. But effectively, there was that communication that they did get an opportunity to consult. But be that as it may, the issue of consulting or finding the legal principles or basis upon which you rely rely on this privilege against self-incrimination is something that the lawyers could have done on their own after getting the facts from Vusimuzi Matlala. It's not something that they needed him for 3 days for. That was the basic argument. But after the ruling, it seems that the application itself wasn't something that was moved afterwards. They went straight to the testimony. But it does feel like the application is finding its way through the testimony, because as each theme comes about, then the Commission has to continuously keep adjourning, because they have to discuss this privilege and this right against self-incrimination, and on what legal basis does he enjoy this privilege. So it's going to be a bit of a circular testimony as we see Matlala continue from today. Even tomorrow he might be here, and I think Wednesday has also been allocated to him as well. And unless his posture changes, this is going to be the persisting pattern before the Madlanga Commission, because nothing that he actually invokes this right against has everything to do with his actual criminal cases. It seems it's what that information will reveal further, who it will bring the Commission to, what themes it will get to, what kind of alleged unlawful conduct it will expose. That is what Matlala is running away from. The naming of names, the themes that come with that, the established alleged networks that would be of interest to a probe of this nature. This is seemingly what is being deterred by this particular approach or posture, let's put it that way.
And I see we've just gone past 5 o'clock. A very good afternoon to you if you're joining us on the SABC News channel. What you're looking at now is basically a developing story. We're waiting for the continuation of Vusimuzi Matlala's testimony at the Madlanga Commission of Inquiry. It has been a day of multiple delays. First, it started with arguments that his legal team had not been able to meet some of the deadlines required around the legal arguments they're going to put forward to why he cannot answer certain questions, invoking the right against self-incrimination. That failed, and then they tried to argue that he was no longer confident in his junior legal team because his senior advocate, Annelien van den Heerfer, is not here today. She's taken ill. So now his legal team is back, as are the evidence leaders. You will be looking... That's Jamie Michaels, by the way, the spokesperson for the Commission, suggesting that we are about to resume. That's why I paused.
Okay, please switch your phones.